Greetings, Healthy Voice listeners. This week, I want to talk about something that I work on with pretty much every student who comes through my studio. And it's something that pretty much nobody thinks about outside of professional voice training. And that subject is diction. I want to talk about diction, not in the old fashioned sense where you might picture somebody working on their posh accent. It's really something that I find to be extremely practical, especially when it comes to the healthy voice path. When I first encountered diction training, I was around 31 or 32 years old, and I was working on an album, and my producer suggested that I do speech practice. I was really surprised by this. I had never done any kind of diction training except for singing. That's it. But I learned some really powerful things practicing speech and diction. And so I want to share with you today why studying the individual sounds that make up every word you say, as well as how those sounds are produced in the body, how this affects why some people get so exhausted, sore, and so frustrated after a day of ordinary conversation. So I recently decided to address this topic, and I wrote 2 articles for Substack, and one of them went out this past week, and another one is scheduled to go out next week, covering this idea, why I think it's important, as well as some exercises that you can begin to work with. So the people who show up to work with me in my private sessions are people who I would say, as I say to everybody, their voices are not broken. There's nothing wrong with their voices. What I hear is a voice that's been under strain for a long time from either high stress environments or chronic bracing, or a lot of people, it's just years of speaking without any true understanding of how the voice mechanism actually works. And so one day the voice stops being manageable. They may find that if they're a teacher, they teach a class for an hour and they feel like they just want to take a nap, or they have a long conversation with someone and afterwards they feel like they have a sore throat. And so speaking for them has become something that costs something, and they want to know why. And the answer is almost always in the individual sounds. So before I proceed, let me explain my motivation for teaching diction and why I myself practice it a lot. When I started paying attention to my speaking voice, I noticed that I often got exhausted. And I had taken it for granted that I had this classical singing background. I thought that because I had this amazing vocal technique that I had been gifted with in my education, I simply thought that it transferred automatically to the speaking voice, which I learned was not true after just a week of teaching high school for the first time. It was my first big job after college, after I moved to Los Angeles. And I taught really just 2 hours a day. I was a part-time music teacher. But I remember I lost my voice for the first time in my life. And I realized I didn't know how to actually talk. I could sing circles around anybody, but I couldn't speak properly. I couldn't speak in a way that felt energizing, the way singing did. In fact, speaking for such a long time just drained my energy. And so what I found when I did begin that speech training many years later, I found myself energized after speaking for an hour as opposed to drained and tired. And so a lot of people come to work with me are feeling drained and tired and exhausted. And they get to a point where they hate speaking. They hate using their voice because it's so uncomfortable. And so one of the first things I do is I teach people how to speak properly. So here's what most people don't realize, and it sounds really funny to say this, but most people don't realize that every single word is made up of individual sounds, and every one of those sounds can be broken into a physical sensation. So we're talking about a specific placement of the tongue, a particular shape of the mouth, a distinct quality of the breath. There's the teeth, there's the placement of everything. And most of us never learn this because when we learn to speak, think back to when, well, you probably don't remember. Probably don't remember your first words or when you learned to speak, but you've probably heard stories about it. And so you know you were very young. We learn to speak by listening to other people speak. The sounds just happen automatically, and they happen below the level of any conscious awareness. We basically we learn by mimicking. And that's fine until it isn't, until the voice starts to break down and you have no idea why, because you've never attended to what you were actually doing with your lips, your mouth, your tongue, your teeth. You never paid attention to it before because we just take our speech for granted. We take our language for granted. The people we learned to speak by being around most likely did not learn any formal vocal training, and so they didn't pass it on to you. And so what I teach people is how to inhabit their voice, how to slow down enough to feel what their voice is actually doing. And then eventually with practice, they learn to make conscious choices about how they want to produce sound. So the moment this actually happens, the moment you stop speaking on autopilot and you start feeling the sensations, the voice begins to ease. And it's not because you did anything complicated. It's really just because you paid attention. So let's try some of this out, and you can see for yourself what happens when you pay attention to the sensation of your voice. So we'll start simple. We'll start with the letter T. So just say the letter T and notice where the tip of your tongue goes. And now say D. Notice where your tongue goes when you say D. See, they actually went to the same place. They went to the ridge just behind your upper front teeth. But the only difference is voicing. T is known as an unvoiced sound. That means that the sound is produced by breath alone. And then D is voiced, means that the vocal folds are engaged. So go back and forth between T, D, T, D. You'll notice something happening in the back of the tongue. You may even notice that the tip of your tongue goes a little bit behind where the T tip of the tongue lands. I sense it as the tip of my tongue is in the front of the roof of my mouth, T, and the D goes a little bit further back. And you can feel, like I said, the back of the tongue drop a little on D. That's the entire difference between the two sounds. They're practically the same sound. And often when speakers don't attend to that distinction, the T and the D blur into each other and the words become harder to parse. The listener has to work harder, and the speaker, already working hard, has to push more to be understood. And if you're a sensitive person, which I imagine everybody listening to this podcast probably is, you can pick up on when people are not understanding you. And it stresses you out because you're trying to be heard, you're trying to be understood, and you don't know how to make yourself any more clearer. It's extremely frustrating. But this is part of what I teach when we work on diction. So say this slowly. Take the time to tell the truth. Take the time to tell the truth. Feel the tongue touching the ridge on every T. You might want to pause and do this several times. It's a really interesting experience to actually feel the sensation of your voice. So then after that, say, do the deep work every day. Do the deep work every day. And if you want to pause, go ahead, but feel the voiced landing of every day. See if you can feel every D, See if you can feel the difference between the two sounds. The thing that I really push in my lessons, whether it's in the community or private, a big part of my method involves sensation. A lot of voice teachers, at least I've had many, many voice teachers in my life, all incredibly talented and incredibly gifted in their own individual ways. But I've never once heard a voice teacher say to me, do you feel what your voice is doing there? Do you feel what that sound feels like? Do you feel the difference between the D and the T? The language I always heard in voice lessons was, do you hear the difference? Do you hear what you sound like? And now that I'm older and I have all this experience with teaching, as well as being a voice student myself, I understand that this is part of the reason why I was so frustrated all the time, and also why my teachers were so frustrated with me all the time, because I didn't understand really how to hear myself. When I made the somatic connection to voice work, I all of a sudden improved at such a quick rate, because I realized that feeling the sensations of my voice made it possible for me to make very swift changes, because I could feel my voice faster than I could hear my voice. And if that doesn't make sense to you, just think about the way you are actually built. Your mouth faces forward. Your ears face out left and right. And so when you speak, your sound goes out straight ahead, but your ears are on the side of your head. Just think about it. No wonder I couldn't hear my voice the way they wanted me to. Now, of course, I've known lots of musicians who have such incredible ears that they actually do hear it. And a lot of my classmates didn't seem to have any problem with this kind of instruction. But for me, as somebody who's extremely sensitive, especially when it comes to tactile sensations, the sense of touch, I tend to, and even when I was younger, it was even more extreme, feel sound before I hear it. And it seems that a lot of people who come to me to work with me can relate to this. And so there's a good chance that you might find this approach helpful. So getting back to our diction lesson. So I want you to say both of these sentences again at a normal speed. See if you can notice any difference. So the T sentence was, take the time to tell the truth. And so pause if you want to do that one. And the D sound is, do the deep work every day. So now let's do another sound, the V and the F. I really like these sounds. And one thing you'll notice whenever you start working on your speech and your diction and you start getting really familiar with these sounds, it's similar to learning songs or hearing songs and having favorites that you get stuck in your head. And so the way you really master speech is to do the same thing with individual sounds, individual letters. And so you start to become intimate with the sensation of each individual letter. And the goal, in my experience, is to have favorites. And so V and F are two of my favorite sensations. Favorite. I didn't realize that word has both of those sounds. So let's start by bringing your upper teeth down to the inside of your lower lip. So upper teeth to the lower lip, but the inside of the lip. Don't curl your lip in, because then you block your teeth, which is an important resonator. So pucker out your lips and place those upper teeth on the inside of the lower lip, and just hold the teeth there gently and breathe out. Just make a breathy sound, and there's your F sound. So that's how we make an F. It's very gentle. It's very soft. Now, to make a V sound, you're going to do the same exact thing. You're just going to add some vibration. So you're going to basically, I guess you would say you would press a little bit harder. So the V sound, just say V. It's the same exact placement, the same point of contact. One is voiced, the V, and one is not. The distinction is subtle, but it's enormously important. Just like the T and the D sound, when you have two sounds that are in the same placement, but one is voiced and one is unvoiced, meaning one is more breathy, the other uses more vibration, it can be very easy for people to misunderstand you. So practice finding the feeling before we say the phrase. If you want to pause and just play around with that, V is one of my favorite sounds. I love the way it feels. It's like a massage on my lips. Okay, so here's the phrase. Every voice has value. Every voice has value. Feel the teeth on the lip for every F and every V. And in this case, there's really just a V so far. Every voice has value. Really elongate it and savor the sensation. That's how you memorize it. That's how you create a muscle memory. Notice the difference between the air between F and V. So let's do a sentence with just F. Okay, say this. Feel free to find your flow. Feel free to find your flow. Notice the difference between the F and the V. All right, so now I want to talk about something that is probably responsible for more vocal fatigue than any other single habit in American English. It's the glottal stop. Just say, uh-oh, uh-oh. Now see if you can feel that catch in the middle, the moment where the breath stops completely and it then releases. So it's like a snap. Uh-oh. That harsh snapping feeling in the back of the throat. That's a glottal stop. It's a legitimate sound and we want to use it correctly in certain context, like the G sound, g, and the K sound, k. But the problem is what we do with it in American English. We tend to use what's known as a hard onset. It's a milder version of that glottal stop. So before vowel sounds, we in America, I don't know how it is in other cultures who speak English. It might be a little different, but I've noticed it a lot in my own voice. I had to work on it for years. In fact, at the end of this podcast, I just started doing this little blurb, this little slideshow of all of my offerings with a recording of my song, I Want a Voice, which I recorded in my early 30s. And wow, did I really attack the beginnings of those sounds. I really used a hard onset. And since then, now when I sing that song, I make quite an effort to avoid that hard onset. So you can hear it in my recording at the end of the video. But the hard onset shows up in a lot of vowel sounds where there's really no closure needed at all. Just say ah for a moment. Ah, sigh into it, because you might by default use the hard onset. So drop the back of your tongue, drop your jaws if you're about to yawn, and go oh, oh. So a vowel sound requires no glottal stop. The tongue doesn't need to tap up to hit the roof of the mouth. It's just an open sound. We call them open vowels. But then say the word and. And if you don't want to say it, maybe you just hear it in my voice. And. Do you hear in my voice, or do you feel in your own the tiny little click or the grip before you say the ah sound? Now say every. You can feel it or hear it before, like at the very beginning of the word. Now say I. So if you're a habitual hard onset speaker, like I am, and I have to work at this, each of those vowels begins with a tiny little compression of the vocal folds. It's a small act of pressure that multiplied across every vowel in every sentence you speak all day long, it adds up to an enormous amount of unnecessary effort. And this is how the voice gets tired. It's not from speaking too much. It's from gripping too much. The metaphor I use with students is surfing. A surfer does not attack the wave. They wait patiently. They read the water. They feel the timing. And at precisely the right moment, they rise and they join the motion that was already there. The wave does all of the work. The surfer's skill is in the joining, in meeting what's already in motion with ease rather than force. And the voice is the same. Sound is already happening. We have sound waves everywhere that we can't hear. This is how radio frequencies work. The antenna goes up, you change the dial, it tunes into the sound current that already exists all around us. The breath is already moving. What we are doing in healthy speech is joining that motion. We're arriving into it at the right moment with presence, but not pressure. But when we grip instead, when we attack the sound, we are fighting the wave all day. And you can't fight the wave all day without exhausting yourself. The alternative is the soft onset, a gentle puff of breath before the folds engage. No grip, no stop, just breath arriving into the voice. It feels like it might be too easy at first, but that feeling is actually correct. You're doing less, and less is right. So see what I mean by this, and just make like you're fogging up a mirror. Make that sound. You notice that there's no grip, there's no hard onset, there's no glottal stop. The tongue is dropped down, the breath flows with ease. That's the ease we're looking for when we speak. The G and the K sounds are produced by the back of the tongue pressing against the soft palate and then releasing. So let's talk a little bit about that. The release is how we get the sound. It's not the pressure, it's the release. Most people press too hard and they hold that pressure too long. So practice this. Feel the back of your tongue pressing lightly and then letting go quickly. Call, keep, clear. And then try good, give, begin. See if you can feel the sensation of release when the sound actually happens. Let the press be as light as possible. The sound lives in the opening, not in the closing. So finally, we come to vowels. A vowel is an open sound, like I said. No tongue touching anything, no lips closing. The throat's open and the voice simply vibrates into space. There's no glottal stop needed before the end of the vowel, but yet we do tend to put it there constantly, especially when a vowel is at the beginning of a word. As you may have noticed, that's what it was in my example words. And, every, always. And so we want to practice these with a tiny breath before the voice begins. So make that ha sound again. And imagine the surfer on the ocean, face down on the surfboard. And as that wave approaches, we begin to let that breath seep out. And then as the surfer joins the wave, that's when we start the word. And, after, every, open, always, enough. Feel the difference between attacking the A and allowing it to arrive on breath. That difference, multiplied across a lifetime of conversation, is the difference between a voice that serves you and one that costs you. So here is your journal prompt. There are 2 things I want you to sit with this week. First, physically. Record yourself speaking for 2 minutes and listen back for the grip before the vowel sounds. See if you can feel that grip, that click. See if you can hear it. And also, can you feel where the effort is coming from? Second, where else in your life are you attacking instead of joining? The wave metaphor has a way of showing up everywhere once you start looking for it. One of my favorite things to do with voice work is to see the metaphor in every vocal technique. And I have found in my own life, as I have worked on these challenges, as I have worked on losing that grip, that need to control everything in my voice, is as I have learned how to relax my body and relax the back of my tongue, allow the sound to come out, I find that I'm more at ease in the company of other people. And I find myself less fearful, less needing to control every little detail of my life. I am a control freak. I am very much a type A. I'm a high strung person who has spent decades working on easing up that need to control, that tendency to grip all the time, just always trying to hold it together, always trying to be so perfect. I've spent decades working on easing up on this. And when I started to understand the crossover between, well, what I call the metaphoric voice. So once I started realizing that every vocal technique I work on has a life metaphor attached to it, a healing metaphor, my life started changing. And that's why I started the Healthy Voice. So thank you for being here with me, for spending all of this time with me. You can read the first article, the T and the D article on Substack right now. If you want to make sure you get the VF article, which goes out on Tuesday, where I also talk about the glottal stop and the vowel attack. It's called Stop Attacking Your Voice. Then subscribe to my Substack. I'll put the links in the description. You might be listening to this on Substack, and so maybe you're already a subscriber, and so thank you so much. If you are on Substack already, consider becoming a paid member. I put out something called The Lab at least once a month. Lately, since I started, I think I've been able to put out 2 a month, and I guarantee one, but when I have them available, I won't hoard them. Basically, what they are is explainer videos that I have Notebook LM create for myself when I'm doing research, when I'm trying to go deeper into my knowledge base on specific topics. And so I post these explainer videos to the lab because I know a lot of people who read my Substack, they're very interested in this topic and they want to go deep. And so the lab is meant for people who are very serious about this work and want to understand as much as possible. So consider becoming a paid member. I currently have about 10 paid members, which I'm so grateful for. If you're one of them, thank you so much for your support. It means a lot to me because I know that you're not just paying as a member to get the videos. I know that your intention is also to support my work, and it means a lot to me. I recognize it and I appreciate it. And once I have a larger paid membership, I will eventually start doing things like lives or something like that. But for right now, since we only have about 10 people, I don't think it really makes sense for me to do anything like that, but in the future I will. So if that's something that you're interested in, please consider being a paid member of Substack. If you want to go deeper though, I go live every week, sometimes twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week in my Healthy Voice community where we do practice sessions together. And every single time I give them a new voice lesson. I give them a new technique to work on, or I go deeper on one that they've already learned. We also have courage circles where members are invited to share their voice with the sole intention of learning how their nervous system responds. It's an extremely supportive audience. We don't put any pressure on anybody to be perfect. It's not a talent show. It is meant to be a community building activity that helps build nervous system resilience in everybody. It's amazing. It's everybody's favorite part of the community. We also have sound healing, which is so fantastic for anybody who's on a healing path, especially when it comes to the voice. So check out that link and you can take a tour of the community and see what it looks like. And if none of that seems interesting to you, check out the Voice Liberation Method, a 7-week self-paced course. definitely intended to get you freeing up your voice, learning about how your nervous system responds and how it affects your voice. We include diction lessons in every single week of the voice liberation method, as well as singing exercises. There's also private sessions with me. If you prefer to do one-on-one, feel free to book an intro session with me, and let's see if there's something I can do to help you out. Thank you so much for listening. Keep going, because the world needs your unique voice.